single currency, pushing it down by nearly a quarter since the start of the year. Investors complain of a rudderless Europe, unable to lead. Is Europe really rudderless? Aren't the Germans and French supposed to be at the helm? More like at each other's throats, opine some. And is the euro's very existence under threat, and why? Today in the France 24 debate, who will save the euro? With Fabrice Pozzoli-Montenay, business editor at news magazine Paris Berlin, in two languages.
French and German.
French and German.
Can work together.
With readers who are mostly, you say?
Well, in equal part, German and French readers. So we are distributed even in Germany and in France. So we try to be read on each part of the Rhine.
All right. Also with us, a man who has to rewrite his textbooks, it seems, every 6 months these days with all the news. Ali Fatemi, who teaches at the American Graduate School of Business. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Also, John Vinocur. He's a columnist and at the New York Times and International Herald Tribune. And on the line from Brussels, Jean Pisani-Ferry, the director of the international economics think tank Bruegel. I'm going to start with you, Jean Pisani-Ferry. Give it to us straight. Is the euro really in danger?
I don't think the euro is in danger. I mean, I'm not that worried about the decline of the exchange rate. After all, we're in a floating exchange rate regime, and we are close to the middle of the range where the euro has been trading since it was created a little bit more than 10 years ago. I think there are questions about how the euro area works, and there is a crisis, no doubt, in the euro area. There is a crisis of the euro area, but it's not a life and death crisis. That's not my assessment.
All right, not a life and death crisis. Let's listen to what Luxembourg's premier, the man who chairs the group of nations that share the euro, had to say on the matter.
I'm not concerned by the actual and for the time existing level of exchange rate. I'm concerned by the abruptness of the fall of the euro.
Ali Fatemi, are you concerned by what he called the rapidism of the fall of the euro?
Well, we're talking about two different things. If we're talking about the fluctuation of the euro, I think Pisani is absolutely right. Euro started at the 117, it's now at 119. It went down to 82, went all the way up to almost 60. So the range is fine. It's a flexible currency, it's floating rate. What's important is, will euro survive with the present participants, with the 16 who are in the euro? There I have my doubts.
You have serious doubts about that?
Yes. I don't think all 16 will be a member of euro system 2 years from now.
Fabrice Pozzoli-Montenay.
Well, there is a lot of talking about that, actually, but I feel, and we feel, even in Germany, that it's a lot of crying wolf and people enjoying to scare themselves, in fact. I feel the euro is quite strong, and even with the weakest parts are solidly supported, actually, by the Eurogroup. So I'm not so anxious about the future of euro. But maybe I'm over-optimistic, but I don't feel it's so terrible.
But you get the impression, John Vinocur, that Europe's political leaders in this crisis are not the ones calling the shots and that they're sort of helpless.
Well, what they've learned is, for the first time, that there's a force outside the euro strong enough to say, we don't believe you, we don't think you're doing the right job, and we have negative expectations, and that force is the markets. What I'd say in addition, whether or not the euro survives or whether or not the 16 remain or the 27 or move around, you have a political reality which is overwhelming and can't be denied. That Europe's ambitions as a major player, as a force in the world, as put it this way, a currency and a political notion that could look the United States and China in the eye and bargain with, it's disappeared. That's not a serious notion anymore. And that's the tragedy for many of what's gone on so far.
Jean Pisani-Ferry, do you agree with what John Vinocur just said in view of the fact that they're trying to hammer out in Brussels, they were working on it just yesterday, these new rules?
Well, I think, in fact, yes, Europe has weakened significantly in this crisis. Initially, there was a lot of confidence about the way the European leaders, the European policymakers would deal with a crisis in a minor part of the Eurozone. Greece is 2 to 3% of the GDP of the Euro area, so it's a tiny part. And the fact that this crisis was mismanaged for a very long time, that too little was done, too late, that there was a disagreement ongoing that were papered over, and then just after a few days you would discover that in fact the disagreement were still there, created distrust in the euro area, in the euro, and made Europe much more obsessed with its own problem than it thought it would be. It thought it would be more a global player, that the euro would be a strength in international discussions about the economy, and in fact it has discovered that as long as those problems are not solved, it's not a strength, it's a weakness.
And do you agree with Ali Fatemi's prediction that perhaps in 2 years' time some of those Eurozone members will no longer be in the club?
Well, if you see the situation in some countries, especially Greece, there are reasons to be worried and there are reasons to question. Now, if you look at what it implies to leave the euro area, it would imply a bigger disaster, in fact. I mean, because all the claims, all the financial claims are in euros. So if you're a Greek company, you have some euro debt vis-à-vis a non-Greek company, a non-Greek bank, then the day you leave the euro, basically your debt remains in euros, your currency depreciates, and you go bankrupt. So the mess that would be created if a country like Greece leaves the euro, I think would make everybody think twice.
All right. Fabrice Pozzoli-Montenay, you say there's been a lot of scaremongering since the beginning of this crisis. Nonetheless, it did not go unnoticed that yesterday there was a dinner date between the French president and the German chancellor that was cancelled. The two said, why sit down? Aides to them said, why sit down when they have really nothing to agree on at this point?
It was just reported for 1 week because Chancellor Merkel has a lot of things to do actually in Germany, and nobody can say it's not true. She has a lot of political problem and internal problem to solve, and I don't think it's a major incident, really. We talked with a lot of German counterparts, we talked with the French official, and everyone says, okay, she has many things to do actually, she has a lot of political internal problem to solve, so this is not a huge problem. I don't think we have to make a mountain of that.
John Vinocur?
I read Süddeutsche Zeitung this morning, I read Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, I read Le Monde this afternoon, and they've all said that there is a political problem, and whether or not there can be an economic government or a quasi-economic government or a notional economic government is not at all decided, and differences remain between the two sides, and they were unable last night to come together for those reasons.
If I may add, I think besides political differences, I totally agree with you, there's a philosophical difference. And the philosophical difference essentially boils around the approach of the Germans and the approach of the French toward monetary policy. The Germans believe in hard money. They believed in solid money. They believed, and they have done that all along. And the French don't. They had 5 devaluations right before they joined the euro.
What do you think, Jean Pisani-Ferry, on this one? This missed dinner date last night, is it a storm in a teacup or is it significant?
I don't know about the dinner, but clearly there are discussions, there are disagreements, there are different views on what should be done. So I don't think this question of monetary policy and the independence of the ECB is still a matter for disagreement between France and Germany. You said there were devaluations in France. It was in the 80s. It was more than 20 years ago. For I think the last devaluation was in 87. So you can hope that a country has graduated and has a different view on monetary policy than the one it had at the time. So I think there are different attitudes vis-à-vis the crisis, and I think that was the most visible. When the crisis in Greece occurred, and when there was this turmoil in the markets 2 or 3 weeks ago, the French attitude was much more let's do something, let's intervene, let's put together a rescue plan, and this was done actually. And the German attitude was much more let's keep the rules, because if we change the rules in reaction to the crisis, then in the long term it's going to have consequences, undesirable consequences. So maybe it's better to let a country default. Maybe it's better to restructure its debt than to come to the rescue. And this difference in attitude is in fact, I mean, it's a long-standing approach to economic policy. It's a more interventionist attitude and a more rules-based attitude that we have on the two sides of the Rhine. And in fact, the euro is a compromise between the two. So what needs to be done now is to build on those differences to work out some new better rules for the system, and this goes with frictions, with disagreements that needs to be solved.
John Vinocur.
Well, I have great respect for Mr. Pisani, who says intelligent things about almost anything that relate to the European Union, and I don't want to contradict him. But what I would say, at the same time, we're talking about rescue funds with X amount of money. What did the markets see when the first rescue effort was made, and what will they see now? They'll see that this is really not the way to deal with the issue. If the thing were to snowball and you had Greece and Portugal and Spain and maybe Italy, what people would be saying, apart from cataclysm is here, is why didn't they do the right thing, which is to restructure the Greek debt immediately? Well, they didn't do the right thing because European banks are too weak to handle it. Everybody ran from the excuse me. Why did they not do the things that the markets and solid management would have required? Why did they not restructure? Because it was too much of a risk. The European banks can't manage it. So you've gone into a rescue fund with everything that represents in terms of questions down the road.
Fabrice Pozzoli-Montenay.
I think you were speaking about the challenge on the euro, and I agree with you, because it's the first time that there is a real challenge on this specific success of the Eurozone. And I feel that many European leaders actually are not ready to fight, but they are in a fight. And from what you call markets, but it can be notation agencies, it can be big banks, and they realize quite slowly, but they begin to realize that they have in front of them quite strong opponents. And they're beginning to think about retaliation, because actually they are fighting banks, which they helped 2 years ago. They offered a lot of money to them, and now, as some people in Brussels say, those banks are biting the hand of the European Union. And this is quite bitter for many policymakers, actually. And a lot of rules are being set for changing that in a very short term, I think.
Can I just cut in for some perspective? Greece will never be able to get out of the mess they're in. 3-4 years down the road, we're going to have the same problem. There's 400 billion euros worth of debt. The only way is if they do something like what they did for Latin American debt, restructure it, the banks have to forgive some of it, and there is no other way. Spain, Portugal, they're down the line unless something is done about those things. One has to be realistic. Once you're talking to the market, you want to make everybody feel good. But as an analyst, you have to look at the problem right in its face. And when you say that eventually they come together, well, I guess you may have a formula to change the nature of the French and the Germans, and someday they become alike, because basically they're different. Look at all the demonstrations in this country, and look at what the Germans are saying. They're raising the tax. Last night I'm watching Deutsche Welle. The man says, yes, I'm glad they're raising the taxes because I don't want my children to be burdened with that. You get me one French person who would say something like that.
But it's in the nature of Europe to have different nations working together. So this is not new, basically.
All right, and John Vinocur, in a column published today, you spoke to a German official who said German-French relations and the European Union in general have entered Neuland, German for uncharted territory.
Indeed. The difference is two essential differences in my view. The markets never functioned as prosecutors in relation to the European project and in relation to European finances. That's obvious. They can call Europe's bluff at every second, every day while the markets are open. The second thing is Europe did not tell the truth about its finances, knowing fully what the situation was, for a period of basically 10 years. You have people on the European Commission, the former French Treasurer, Mr. Juillot, Karel Rucht, the Belgian Commissioner, who said, I was at the meetings where either the Irish problems or the Greek problems were passed over and tossed under the table. The same was true in 2004 and 2005 when France and Germany were sinners. Now Europe has to learn a different language. It has to learn a different kind of frankness in order to make the markets believe it.
All right. Jean Pisani-Ferry, French newspaper Le Monde called it the hypocrite's ball in a recent column. This what John Vinocur is describing. Are the new rules being set out going to change all that?
Well, it's a change of behavior beyond the rules. It's true that for much too long this was a kind of gentleman's club. It's mostly men actually, where nobody wants to be nasty with colleagues, and so there's a problem. You gently say you've got to solve this problem, and the reason why the colleague doesn't solve the problem is that there are deep reasons behind at home. Why the colleagues know perfectly well that there are problems to solve, but there are political difficulties at home that prevent it. So this clearly has to end. I'm not sure that much will be obtained from only the change in the quality of the dialogue. I think the number of changes have to take place also in countries. If you take the fiscal dimension, the budgetary dimension, here essentially, each country has to ask itself, what do I want to do, and how do I want to react to the fact that the confidence from lenders, from the markets, is not to be taken for granted.
All right, and
everybody looks at the spread with Germany now.
All right, I'm going to cut you off.
That's a strong reminder.
I'm just going to cut you off there, Jean Pisani-Ferry, because we're going to have to take a break. But we're going to look at that fiscal dimension when we come back for the second part of the France 24 debate. Stay with us.